Bird flu has led to death of over 200 million birds worldwide. Why UK and other developed nations are not recommending or permitting vaccines in the poultry industry. Warm welcome to Munir's Outreach today, 26th of February 2023. According to the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs called DEFRA, there are at least 8 different reasons UK and other developed nations are not permitting the use of the vaccine in poultry industry. And in this short video, I'm going to walk you through all those 8 different reasons behind this. Number 1, difficulties in the detection of active flu infections. DEFRA thinks that if the vaccine is applied into the poultry industry, it might be able to reduce the mortality in the birds, but yet the virus would still be causing infection within the bird flock. So therefore, it will mask the active infection that is ongoing into the poultry sector, and that would lead to difficulties in detection because you have to have an active infection ongoing into the bird so that it is visible, birds are sick, that you can pick the infection. So number 1 reason that UK does not recommend vaccine in the poultry industry is that it would mask the active infection that is ongoing into the poultry flock. Number 2, the gap between vaccine and the circulating flu virus. Since influenza virus mutate quite rapidly, DEFRA thinks that if the vaccine that is currently available is applied into the poultry industry, it might not match to the virus that is causing the infection, and therefore it might not provide enough protection. And also, since the virus is mutating quite frequently, the predictability is not possible, so therefore it will give a false sense of security. Number 3, delayed times of vaccine action. Most of the bird flu vaccines required at least 3 weeks to mount a good protection in the vaccinated birds. And if 2 doses are administered from 4 to 6 weeks apart, that is too long time to contain an infection if it is already happening within the flock. So this poses a serious practical risk, and that is another reason that DEFRA do not recommend vaccination in the poultry industry. Number 4, lack of vaccine performance in some bird species. Since there is no vaccine that has been proven efficacious in different bird species, for example, geese, game birds, and therefore it is very difficult to anticipate how these vaccines would work into different bird species. And if one vaccine is given into one species, another vaccine is given to another species, very difficult to really compare the performance between these vaccines across the population of the bird. Number 5, DIVA issue. Yes, differentiation of infected versus vaccinated animal. So DEFRA thinks that if you apply a vaccine into a poultry flock, it's very difficult to discriminate between the birds those are actually infected by the infection or those have the immunity from the vaccine. So this is a real risk, because if you don't really know what infection is ongoing in a bird, whether that immunity they have mounted is because of the vaccine or from the infection, you cannot anticipate whether there is an active infection ongoing into the flock. While this barrier can be mitigated by developing vaccines that can allow detection of the immune responses that could be specific to the vaccine or specific to the viral infection, but yet this poses one of the major risks for the reason DEFRA do not recommend the vaccination into the poultry flock. Number 6, vaccine-induced stress. DEFRA thinks that maybe there is this little advantage of applying the vaccine into the poultry flock, but because of the stress a vaccine will cause onto the bird, it raises some of the welfare and ethical issues, and particularly when the speed is really necessary to apply the vaccine on a very large flocks in a relatively shorter period of time, and therefore DEFRA thinks that it does not merit to apply a vaccine into the poultry flock at the moment. Number 7, masking the risk. DEFRA thinks that the vaccine, if it is applied into the poultry flock, it will induce a partial immunity, and that immunity could be good for some level of reducing the severity of the disease, but it would not prevent the virus to be circulating into the poultry flock. And that is really the concerns, because you are assuming that the infection is gone because you can't see really the clinical sign, but the risk is there, and you will not really posing any biosecurity or any other control measure because you assume that the virus is not going to infect because the birds are vaccinated. So that really is the risk that the vaccines would mask the infection and lead to possible emergence of the infection. Lastly, number 8, risk to the handler. DEFRA thinks that if you apply a vaccine into the poultry flock, people who will be administering that vaccine might be exposed to some of the infections that are ongoing into the poultry flock. So therefore, it does not matter to have a vaccine applied against flu into the poultry at the moment. Farmers are not allowed to apply vaccine in their poultry flock. What happens if the poultry flock is infected with the bird flu? So the policy is to cull all those birds those are infected, and the compensation is unfortunately only applied to the birds those who are healthy, those who are not showing clinical sign. So there is some level of compensation, but not for the whole flock, and that is really not a sustainable solution. While this is good for a control of the infection, because if you are culling all the birds those are infected, meaning you're reducing the chances for the spread of this infection. However, this whole situation is not sustainable. Why? Is because first, a lot of animals need to be culled, a lot of birds need to be culled, and that is not favorable for economy, but also for egg production. And that is also one of the reasons that the prices for the eggs are increasing, and the farmers are not able to sustain this overall situation. So what is the solution? The solution is to have more effective vaccines that not only mitigate those 8 points that DEFRA have concern at the moment, but also provide an added value for better protection and to have a sustainable protection within the poultry flock. And that is the reason certain efforts are being put in place in different parts of the world to compare the efficacy of different existing vaccines, so that a vaccine that is probably a tailor-made or with a better performance can be proposed to the farmers across the globe, so that we can have a better protection and a bit better handle onto the bird flu.